Hello, friends. I don't. Car, do you have any idea what we just watched?
A surrealist nightmare.
Oh God. Oh, I don't even know. Yeah, Mr. Robot is what we're talking about. This is almost cancelled. I'm Peter, and that's Connor. And yeah, it's season two, episode 10. It is EPS
11.
2.9. Oh, sorry, episode 11. Sorry. EPS 2.9 underscore Python dash part 1 dot PZ. No, P7Z. Sorry, or P7Z if you're American. I'm clearly flustered. I'm clearly confused. I'm clearly not knowing what's going on because, quite frankly, that was probably the most out there episode of the show. And I think the reason why it was the most out there, right, not to jump ahead in plot points, because this episode starts with Mr. Robot, with Elliot, I should say, telling us that he wants to try lucid dreaming. That he's going to try this thing where he's going to go into a dream. So right away, Mr. Robot's already a show where we're constantly questioning what we're seeing, what he's seeing, what's real, what's not real, and then he says he's going to be maybe in a dream.
And do you know what? It makes not just the stuff with Elliot at the end, it makes all of the Angela stuff feel like a lucid dream. Everything, it's not quite natural.
Yes, if I didn't say full spoilers, by the way, full spoilers before we, really get into things here. But like, because as soon as he said that at the start, and the camera pulls up, and he's, uh,
Mind awake, body
yeah, that
asleep.
was it. That was the phrase. As he's saying that, as the camera's fading away, I'm like, right, I'm going to call it now. The rest of this episode is not real, right? But then stuff started happening as it made sense that this is real. Dom's in the hospital, as an aftermath to the previous, and we'll get to that. And Angela's been taken with these people, and we'll get to that. Lots of things to get to, and we'll get to them all. But so I was, but no, this all makes sense. This must be real. Plus, Elliot's not here. Why would he be dreaming about stuff that he doesn't know about?
That's the thing. It
Yeah.
feels like it should be real, but at the same time felt unnatural in a
Well,
way. Like it was presented unnaturally.
Well, let's save Elliot for last, right? Because technically all
Yeah.
of his stuff was at the end. So, um, we'll go with Dom first. Dom was, I guess, the least interesting of the bunch.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, we had a little bit of Philip as well, but we'll go with Dom first. Dom is at the hospital and she's having words with her superior, and she's saying, "Oh, this is bigger than this. The Dark Army did this." And the superior basically says, "Look, China is bailing out this entire situation with trillions of dollars. They're basically getting away with this. If they're connected to the Dark Army, they're getting away with it. We have to work around this." But obviously the main things we want to point out in this conversation is that Darlene, because they don't reveal in this episode who's dead, who
No.
lived, who died.
She just says people died, like plural.
Well, she says two things of interest. One says multiple people died,
Yeah.
and she then says, "I want to do the interview." And that's the key thing, I think, right there is someone's alive, someone worth talking to is
Yeah.
alive. Hopefully Darlene. And I have a theory it's Darlene. I actually decided middle of the week between episodes that I think Darlene's alive. And
Okay.
the reason for that is because everything I said last week about how I thought she might be dead because thematically her story's kind of ended and she's ended her arc and she's had like these fitting final moments that feel like it could be the end of that character. All of
Yeah.
that's still true. I'm not changing my mind in any of that. But there's one thing I thought of from the previous episode that makes it thematically unsatisfying if she's dead, which is why I think she's not.
Go on.
She heard Whiterose say that Phase 2 is Elliot's plan. If she doesn't get more of that as a character, then it's unfulfilled.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
She should have to confront
yeah,
Elliot still. Like she should
yeah.
have to acknowledge this.
There's
We
a
haven't seen
breadcrumb
that.
there that's not been explored, and I feel like that's confirmation.
And this show is nothing if not utterly meticulous in following every tiny breadcrumb.
I know. Essentially.
It might take them a while, but they always follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah. Otherwise, though, Dom goes home and feeling defeated and worthless, she has a very pathetic conversation with Alexa, which is her Siri-like
Yeah,
thing.
basically.
Yeah. And it's a lot like the movie Her, actually, for like a little
It
while,
is, yeah.
where she starts asking Alexa if she's her friend and if she loves her.
What color her eyes
Yeah, and it just gets really depressing. And
does.
I think more than anything, it's purely a character thing for Dom and where she's feeling right now because she feels that she's on the heels of this case and it's been taken away from her because the system is protecting the people
I
that are
think
behind
as
it.
well, more than anything, it shows how alone she is. Because obviously
Mm.
she's always been a loner and she seemed fairly comfortable with that. But
Which
something's changed.
which would lead me to suspect that somewhere down the line she's going to flip sides and she's actually going to be on the side of either Darlene or the Dark Army, or not Dark Army, but I am in the Dark Army because she obviously has reasons to not trust them.
Yeah.
But like Darlene or F Society or whatever, like I feel like she might actually flip and go against the system at some point.
Okay.
Like I feel like they're building motivation for that, maybe.
Yeah, the thing is, I can kind of see her not change sides because she is too good. She's too in with the law. She's very by the book.
I get that, but I feel like the law is actually starting to do the wrong thing, and like this is like her breaking down, and this is what might, you know, persuade her to or give her the
Okay.
motivation to shift. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but it's just discussing her being alone and like how she feels in that scene. I'm like thinking maybe that's where they'd go with her next season, but it's just a guess. Actually, before we move on, I want to point out because it happens with two different characters, which is why I want to mention it. Uh, when we first see Angela, there's a song playing that is from Back to the Future, and
Yeah.
then at the end of the episode, another song from Back to the Future is playing, which I mean, the first one made me chuckle, and I read, "Oh, that's Back to the Future," and of course we know that Elliot's favourite movie is Back to the Future Part Two. But then Earth Angel played at the end, and that's obviously a big song from Back to the Future. That's what's played. Well, Marty's like, fading away, and then his parents kissing, and he gets better. But it's a big moment in the movie. And I just thought it was interesting that it opened and ended with Back to the
Yeah.
Future songs. But yeah, so that's Dom. We'll briefly mention Philip because Philip's making his power plays, and it seems like he getting the Chinese to help is now going to try and double cross them by because it even says that he's going to like turn it against them, the money they've gave him by like developing a new Bitcoin, ecoin is the
Ecoin,
yeah.
yeah, but it's essentially he's undermining the Chinese. He's also undermining his own government.
Mm.
He's what he's doing by establishing his own currency. He is putting himself and that currency on par as equals with the government immediately. He's
Yeah.
no longer just a corporation owner. He is a world leader,
Yeah,
essentially.
it goes back to what he was saying last week about wanting to be the most powerful person in the room, and
It does.
this might get him to at least equal footing, if not the number. I would argue it would be the number one slot in this situation in the show because the money's so messed up that if he has his own currency that's just on its own, then all of a
You
sudden
know,
he dictates how valuable it is
he
almost.
does. I just, we're talking about how him last week, him saying about the most powerful person in the world room. I had a thought. He says, "Oh, one in one room, maybe two," and he has a bit of a chuckle.
I think I know what room you might be referring to now that we've
No,
seen.
no, no.
All right, no,
It's
okay,
I think who we speculated who the two people
yeah.
could be. I don't think they're both Whiterose, just in his different personas,
Yeah,
and
so
he's aware of both of them, and that's why he's making the joke to himself.
true. That's very possible. I still like the idea that one of them's Elliot, and
I do
whatever
as well, but
Elliot's personality was when he
yeah, yeah.
started Dark Army. If that is indeed true, of course, pure speculation at this point still. But if that's the case, then yeah, yeah. So that's Philip, and I want to obviously Angela's story and the Elliot story are the two
The big ones,
the
yeah.
big ones. So let's tackle Angela. So she's in the car. She's taken to this house, and she's put into a room, and it's a room with a really old computer. I think it was it an Apple computer, like an old. No, it was a Commodore.
Yeah, it was kind of, yeah.
Commodore, and there's a fish tank, and that's a dark room. And in walks a little girl, puts in one of these giant floppy disks, and this weird game comes up on the screen with questions, and the girl starts making Angela answer questions, and shows that if she doesn't answer them, she'll get punished, and she shows her these marks on her back where she's been like beaten.
Beaten, yeah.
This was the moment where I was like, this just went full on David Lynch. Like, this is so out there. This is like a scene from a David Lynch movie where you have no idea what's going on. There's just this weird tone to everything. The questions make no goddamn sense. The first question she asks her is, "Have you ever cried during sex?" Which, by the way, now Sam Esmail is going to get asked that in every interview he ever does.
Yeah. But this is where it started to feel like, hang on, is this whole episode a lucid dream? Like, even though this makes sense from a story point, this, like you said, everything's just so strange, and it's just, you're questioning everything. It feels like it's a dreamlike state.
Yeah. But then, of course...
I don't think that it is a dream
No,
either.
I don't think it is either.
Real, but...
Because obviously where it goes is after the questions are all answered, in walks Whiterose.
Yeah.
Answering who's taken her, because obviously we speculated last week it could be Whiterose, it could be the Dark Army as a whole, it could be Philip, it could be the FBI, it could be...
There's too many variables last week.
But it's Whiterose, and Whiterose sits down and says, 28 minutes is how much time I've allotted to this conversation. We're probably not going to discuss everything they said, because, I mean, hell if we're going to remember all of it, but the big bullet points and the stuff that really stood out to me is one, Whiterose saying Angela, the Dark Army should have killed her months ago. Like,
90 days was what she said.
Yeah, and the fact that she's not dead is interesting to her. It's it's fascinating to her that she needs to know why she's this important. And of course, my mind immediately goes, well, if Elliot's secretly the ruler of the Dark Army, he's
protecting her.
He's put a sign on her saying she's untouchable. You do not touch her.
Yeah.
But
here's the but. Whiterose knows about Elliot and knows that presumably he's in there with them, right? Because we know that.
Yeah.
Whiterose also knows Elliot and Angela, and she even talks about that too.
Angela. That's the other big stuff we're going to get to.
But the point is, if that is the reason that she's protected, why wouldn't she put that together quite easily herself? Like, it feels like she should be able to put those things together herself.
Yeah, true, but again, we don't know all the variables though. We have no idea. Like I don't know. I don't have an answer. This episode is a complete mind. The cluster bomb. It's there. So she brings up the plant where Elliot's dad and Angela's mum died, and she says, "What if I told you they died for a greater good?" And this is where things really start getting out there. Like, I'm starting to think, where the hell are they going with this? And she starts saying, "What if that made you who you were? This made you who you were, and this is important. You became these people who are important, and you're in the crossroads of this big event, which we are assuming is phase 2, or at least phase 2 is a part of what she's talking about."
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like you're talking about them as if they're the chosen ones, as if they're looking Leia. You're like, this is how you're talking about them right now. Like, what have you had planned all these years? Were you grooming them in some way?
And I think what's most interesting is, obviously we understand why Elliot's so important. We get that. But what is it about Angela that we don't know yet that makes her so essential?
And does Angela now know? Because, of course, when it gets to the end of the scene, like Whiterose says, "I don't want you to just hand me the proof. You can find more proof. That means nothing to me. I want you to believe in what we're doing." Or to that effect, "I want you to be a believer of this thing."
Yeah.
And, Angela's like, "Well, what is this thing? What do you want me to believe?" And, of course, Sam Esmail cuts to another scene before we get what the explanation is. But we see the end result. We see Angela go to a lawyer and say, "Never call me again. Everything's fine. Forget that voicemail." And she's a believer. You can see it in her eyes.
She is clearly converted.
She is converted to the way of the Whiterose. And I have...
what I would give to know what was said.
And it's just kind of like... And I knew we weren't going to get it. I knew he's laying out the cards on the table, but they're all face down. Yeah. And we're not going to see them flipped. We'll see them flip gradually over the next year, maybe. Probably more than that.
Probably more, given the show's arduous pace at times.
But... And that's really started to it's really interesting because the end of the last season, it only just introduced Whiterose, and then at the end of the season, the post cliffhanger, the post credit scene, we got the the Chinese counselor version of Whiterose meeting with Philip, and it opened the show up into all these new areas that weren't really there before. Like the show expanded, and this season, as a result, has been very different from season one. And I feel like this is the first half of the finale. It's two-parter, and I feel like this is opening the show up again. All these ideas that Whiterose has brought up in this conversation, that they're important, that they're at the crossroads of something great, and some stuff we're going to get to in Mr. Robot's, or Elliot's side of the story, it feels like we're hinting at something bigger. And I have to even ponder the question, are we hitting science fiction? Are we getting to a point where there's going to be some sort of science fiction thing going on?
Do you know, there was a moment where, because obviously I've seen a lot of people speculate this is going to get science fiction-y.
Yeah.
And you know when that little girl walks out, and she kind of looks like Angela. Do you know what I mean? Like similar. She's got the blonde hair, the ponytail.
Do you know what?
Like, they're not.
It wasn't even when she walked out. I thought that as soon as she walked in. And I sort of dismissed it.
No, well, yeah.
Yeah, I sort of dismissed it. It was like, well, she's similar. But she had the same hair, yeah, you're right. And
same hair, and Angela, the way she was looking at it, I was like, this isn't like some weird time travel-y stuff that's just thrown in here, is it? Because for a second I was like, I just don't trust this show anymore, not to do anything.
I'm not going to lie, nothing would please me more than this going ultra sci-fi. I think I would be really in my element if that happened. I
think as long as it does it capably, like it transitions well, which I have no problem with. I have absolute faith in Esme at this point.
Yeah, I just don't even I don't even know where to begin with speculate. Well, we already speculated, but like speculating what the grander scale of this is, like what is really going on. Like, yeah, because it felt like at the end of season one we had an idea. It was like, all right, Mr. Robot's in his head. It's his father. It's that. Almost to the point where I wasn't even sure what season 2 was going to be. I'm like, well, I don't really know what the story for season 2 would be. They've completed the hack, and we know that that's his father in his head, and like what's left to tell? That was
how young and naive we were.
I know. I almost had that feeling, and now we're talking about possibly science fiction coming into play. We're talking about
It's like you say. You know how like in that post-credit scene one, it kind of got bigger. It kind of opened the crack up.
Yeah.
And then this kind of blows it way up. And it's now the question is, how big can this get?
Yes, it is very much a question. So, right, well, let's go to...
before we move on,
okay. Yeah.
I want to give a massive shout out to the music in the Angela stuff.
Oh yeah, it was good.
Oh my god, the slow, kind of steady pulsing synths. Absolutely beautiful stuff.
But then, when it got a little bit emotional, the piano came in over top of it.
And that piano, the traditional piano theme, and that also transitioned us nicely back to Elliot, that piano theme.
Yeah.
As we've so often done.
I might have imagined this, right? Because obviously it comes back to Elliot, and he's whispering, and it builds up again to hear what he's saying again, right? But I am positive there was another scene, and I don't know if... And this is the annoying thing, and I tried finding it afterwards again, but I couldn't. But I am convinced there's a scene, it's either in the Angela section or in the Elliot section, where there's more whispering. In the middle of the scene. And I was trying to understand what...
It's throughout this final... this Elliot scene where he gets up.
Mm-hmm.
It's throughout all of this now. Like, it goes on for a long time, and in the background, just underneath...
Yeah, but there was a moment where it felt like it was saying something specific, like it came up, like.
Right. Okay.
But I can't remember what the moment was, and it's because I was so engrossed in what was going on. I'll have to go hunting. More on that next week. But yeah, so Elliot gets up, and essentially what Elliot's done, at least what we're perceiving at this point, because by the time we get to the end of this, we're going to be speculating all sorts of things that may be going on here. But it seems like he has put himself into a lucid dream so that he can observe when Mr. Robot's in control, like Mr. Robot does when he's in control.
Yeah.
And he's watching Mr. Robot find the thing he was looking for, which turns out to be a menu that's got a code on it, and it's like goes through 2 different keys to find out what the actual message is. It's in a phone number, and it leads to a message saying go to this taxi on this corner, or go to this corner, and there's a cab there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this presents the idea to us here when he's in this state, Mr. Robot cannot perceive Elliot, yeah? He cannot see or hear him. Elliot says this is what it's like for him, the silent observer. This is what it's like for you. But my question is, that's not how it works for Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot is not a silent observer. Elliot, when he's not in control but is there, Elliot can see him. He can hear him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So was Mr. Robot just ignoring him? Or could he actually not hear him?
That's good, because one of the other thoughts I had is that it wasn't actually live. One of my thoughts is he was living through something that happened already when he was blacked out and Mr. Robot was in control, which would then explain why I couldn't hear him, because it's,
it's just a memory.
Yeah, it's a memory. But it would still explain how he sees everything, because it's all in his head, because it's the same person. So,
it's all been there, yeah. That would work too, actually, very well.
That was just one thought I had, so that may explain that particular question if it turns out to be the case. But so yeah, he gets to the cab, and this guy speaks no English. The driver, he knows enough to say Elliot yes, Elliot no. That's basically the gist of his English, and asks for an address, and then I'm actually disappointed he didn't say bonsoir, Elliot.
I was so like 100% expecting it, but I guess the reason he doesn't is because to him, this isn't a momentous return. This isn't a massive reuniting. They've presumably been in contact a long time.
As Mr. Robot, yeah.
As Mr. Robot, obviously, but for all he knows, Mr. Robot and Elliot are the same.
Yeah. And so this is going to... Do I pose the questions before we talk about what they talk about, or do I do it?
Yeah, because I think I've got the same questions.
Is this really Tyrell?
I don't know. Even Elliot doesn't know.
Well, yeah, obviously it's a really funny scene, actually, because Elliot starts asking the cab driver, like, can you see him? Can you see him? And he, like, can you hear him? Can you see him? And it's a very funny scene.
And Elliot even tells us, we've established what I see can't be trusted.
Yeah, it's what I can't see. That's what I'm really curious about. Yeah, and it's good, because it plays with everything we've done up until this point in the show. Everything we've seen with Mr. Robot in Season 1, with the prison in Season 2. It all builds on what we know as an audience. But not even before that, though, even ignoring that, one of the first things I noticed was Tyrell's voice was a little off. His accent felt like it was more straight American, I guess. Whereas last season it felt more like...
Had the Danish or whatever
just a little bit of the Danish was still in there. And I don't know if that's... really means anything. Like,
I get that. It's possible just the actor living in America for an extra year has kind of just subtly changed it that way,
or it just got better at doing it, I guess. Yeah, but it's entirely possible. But they're walking to a location, and Tyrell says, "You know where we're going." When Elliot asks, like, "Don't be silly. You know where we're going." Or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but
yeah.
And he, is like, yeah, Phase 2's there, and the Dark Army told this, and it's like, oh, right. So if this is Tyrell, and Tyrell's not been, like, corresponding with the Dark Army, and this all goes back to a theory that some people had at the end of Season 1, and I poo-pooed it. And I'll tell you why I poo-pooed it, right? Now, the theory is that Tyrell is also Elliot, right? And I poo-pooed it at the time because there was lots of things that didn't add up. There was, like, Gideon would go and see Tyrell at his work at Evil Corp.
I think the much more obvious was Joanna.
Yeah, well, no, Joanna was the reason why people suspected it. Because in that final scene in Season 1, maybe not now because we've had more scenes with them, but in that final scene in Season 1, when she's like, and he's like, can she hear me talking to you? Like, does she know me this well? Like, and because of the way she acts with him, I almost bought, or lots of people almost bought, that she knew it was really him, but knew that it was like an Elliot mode. So
see, I get that. I just mean from context later where...
Yeah.
I guess that actually still doesn't... Well, I was going to say the idea that she said, I find my husband and bring him back.
Yeah, it could still...
He could still do that. He could still bring back the personality he's lost.
I don't know how it works with the Gideon stuff in Season 1, though, because Gideon wouldn't be in on this, and Gideon goes to see him at Evil Corp as if he's a different person.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sit right.
So, but at the same time, I can't deny that this scene, because we know that, at least from that conversation we heard with Whiterose that said Phase 2 was Elliot's plan, and if either Tyrell is literally Tyrell, and he is working with the Dark Army as a sort of intermediate for Elliot's other personality or whatever, right? Or Mr. Robot himself, right? Or Tyrell himself is Mr. Robot, and that's the personality that's working with the Dark Army.
There is an answer that solves both of these problems.
Oh, hit me.
We know Elliot creates his personalities based on real people. Mr. Robot was his dad. He was a real person.
So Tyrell now is in his head,
so
but
Tyrell was a real person. He shot him in that 3-day gap that we don't have, and we know that it very highlighted the gun in the popcorn, and then in the ensuing time period after, he has created the personality of Tyrell.
So maybe he didn't start the Dark Army, but he basically walked in and started running it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know. It's possible, I guess. I mean, what isn't at this point?
But at the same time, I mean, he'd have to have done it in 3 days, because he went straight to prison at the end of season 1's finale.
But don't forget that 3 days, he still doesn't remember.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's absolutely
So
but I'm saying whatever he did, he had to have done it in 3 days, if this is the case.
It was, and it reminds me of the absolutely fantastic line where Tyrell asks Elliot, he goes, "Have you forgot everything?"
Oh, yeah.
Just a fantastic callback, of course.
Yeah,
Have you forgotten everything again from last season?
Darlene,
yeah.
That revealed, that was good.
But it makes you question, what did he actually forget in those 3 days or before?
And it does almost feel like in the finale, in the second part of the finale, we're finally going to get to see what happened in those 3 days.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny how they waited till the season finale to get there. Now, the question is, though, are we satisfied if Tyrell's actually dead, and now Tyrell is just another Elliot?
Yes. If they play it not necessarily exactly the way I've just said it, but if it is a scenario similar to that, I'd be happy with that.
I probably would be too, but at the same time, I would be a little disappointed that Tyrell's just been dead this whole time. I feel like there had to have been more to it than that, and I still kind of feel that way.
Sure, but then there's the question of why is he dead, and why can he not remember that? What's so important about his death that's made it unrememberable? I think it would be less the idea that he's dead and he's just been dead the whole time, and more the circumstance of why he's dead and what's so important about that.
But the way they played it for a lot of the season was...
Is he dead or isn't he?
Yeah. So I feel like the more interesting answer is that he isn't.
I agree.
So I kind of hope he's still alive. But at the same time, we still don't know what the address was. We know that the bodyguard guy, he's told Joanna.
Yeah.
Because we do see one scene of them, and he shows her the phone, and she's like, "Oh, this is the best present he's ever got me," and that's all we get. So obviously that'll get picked up next episode, or it better. I mean, come on. But that's all we get of that, and then of course the episode ends with Tyrell cracking the Casablanca reference as they walk off in the direction of this Phase 2 location.
See, I've seen a lot of people. I did a quick look online after the episode. So a lot of people complaining that this was split up and not aired back to back, and they felt like it really suffered. I disagree. I feel like this episode end capped itself really well. Still, it felt like the end of an episode. It was a part 1 as much as it was also a part 20 of the continuing story.
It's funny because last week you were the one concerned that
I was concerned, but I did say if there's a good reason for it, I'll be okay with it. And I feel like this episode was contained enough that it satisfied me.
Well, like I said last week, I trust Sam Esmail. He's made this decision.
Yeah. Like I said, my worry was that it was a studio decision and not his decision.
But we're clearly seeing that he gets his way now.
Yeah.
They are getting so many critical, quotes and things from this show that they are just letting him run wild, which is great. So by all means, I think the cliffhanger works really well. If I have one criticism about the episode, it would only be that the structure's a little bit weird. Because we leave Elliot for so long that I was convinced we weren't going to see Elliot for the rest of the episode.
I was too, actually.
And then it came back to him, and then it basically stuck with him for the rest of the episode, barring one cut to Angela's visiting the lawyer.
I get it, but I feel like it was essential to keep him out of it while we did all the Angela stuff. Because, like you said, like the way it feels like a dreamlike state is thematically set up by the idea that Elliot was doing this lucid dream stuff.
Yeah,
so I feel like intercutting that with anything would have detracted.
But it did
from
intercut within the Angela story.
Yeah, but right at the end, like not until after she left the room.
But
which was where the dreamlike state was.
But he's still kind of lucid dreaming, though. Like he's doing that the entire time at the end. So if you're going to intercut once, why not intercut more? I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm just saying the structure was kind of weird.
Yeah.
That'd be more than a complaint about the episode, but otherwise it was a tantalizing, mind messing of an episode. But as someone who is a huge fan of Lost and theorizing about Lost week to week, and as someone who is a fan of David Lynch movies, this episode worked for me quite a bit.
It worked for me a lot. I saw a lot of people complain that Angela's stuff went on too long, and I don't agree.
Honestly,
with that.
I wasn't keeping track of how far the episode we were in. But see, when Whiterose said I've scheduled 28 minutes, I was almost hoping that it was going to be the rest of the episode and it was going to be exactly 28 minutes.
Do you know what? Part of that me questioned that as well.
I was thinking, I was
wouldn't
like,
put it past it.
Give me this 28-minute conversation, which will be fascinating because Whiterose is going to drop a lot of truth bombs on us and like reveal stuff. And
also, 28 minutes is a lot of time, like for her.
It is, exactly, which is
especially
why
when she gave Elliot far less.
And it's also a lot of time in an episode of TV. Like, it's more than half the episode, so like it would make us feel the importance of this amount of time. Now they didn't do that, and I'm not complaining that they didn't, but for a minute, I thought they were going to do that, and it went on for a good 10 minutes maybe. So
yeah, it was lengthy, especially as it didn't really cut away from it much at all.
It didn't.
Did not once.
Not until it went back to Elliot, and then obviously that was the end of that because then it was the.
So it wasn't a long uninterrupted scene.
The only time it cut was it cut obviously when the little girl left, and then it cut back in
when
Whiterose
comes in.
But once Whiterose was there to the end of that scene, it never cut to anything else.
Yeah.
All right, I just had a crazy thought to ponder. Right, I don't even have an answer to this. What I'm about to say. But I mentioned the song Earth Angel from Back to the Future is playing, and it's playing during the scene with Elliot and Tyrell at the end, before the Casablanca reference, where the music goes cheesy at the end to
very Hollywood swell up.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about that moment in Back to the Future when that song's playing. So, spoilers for Back to the Future, if you've not seen it, which unless you're Connor and you're weird and you don't see it until your 20s,
I take the spoilers either way. It's this point now where you run the risk.
But just think about that scene. Think about that scene in Back to the Future. So he is trying to get his parents back together because he's been erased from time. Because he might never be born because his parents aren't coming together. He is literally fading away during that scene.
I see where you're going with this.
Right?
What if Elliot's fading away?
Yeah. And then he comes back because he manages to make things click again. And, that's when he stands up and starts playing guitar again. And this all happens during this song.
Yeah.
And you know what? The fact is, if you'd went back to season 1 and told me when they mentioned Elliot's favourite movie was Back to the Future Part 2, and then we seen a picture of him and his dad dressed up as Doc and Marty when he's looking at the pictures, if you'd have told me back then that we might theorise in a season's time that thematically this might actually have to do with something, I'd have said, yeah, that's crazy. But now?
I think you could be onto something. Like genuinely think, because as soon as you started saying it, it's like, oh, I get you. Like, it makes sense.
Like, everything about that movie is about accidentally erasing yourself from history and then trying to fix it.
Yeah.
What if that... And the second one, which is specifically his favourite, is about creating an alternate timeline, which I brought up when Whiterose said that she liked living out 2 timelines. She liked, 2 universes, So I want to put that out there. I want to put these thoughts out there, that what if thematically there's actually, maybe not specifically time travel, although we did mention the girl looking like Angela, but what if thematically the idea of erasing yourself and fixing it are parts of what's going on here?
Yeah, the idea that perhaps he's losing himself with the other personalities taking over more, would be Elliot fading away.
But then how does he fix it?
That was exactly what I was just about to say. Oh, I love this show too much.
That's the penultimate episode, part 1 of the finale. We'll be back next week, of course, with the season 2 finale of Mr. Robot, and I am bracing myself for it.
And I'm preparing to cry afterwards, the fact that we have no more for a year.
No more Mr. Robot, but 25 other shows to...
It's not enough. It's not enough to make up for Mr. Robot. Nothing can fill this void.
Oh dear. Let us know in the comments what you think of this episode, thoughts and theories and all that stuff. Anything we missed, as we sometimes do. There's so much to talk about in this show. Also, look for all the other stuff coming. What's the point of even plugging everything else? It's not Mr. Robot. But there's other shows coming.
Westworld might be just as good.
Westworld's hitting at the
Next
start
week?
of October. It's October 1st, I think, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it's not next week, no.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was in a couple of weeks.
No, there's some network shows starting next week, but Westworld's in another couple of weeks yet. But yeah, lots of shows starting. We'll be covering tons of stuff, pilots at the very least, and continuing what's worth continuing with.
It's just looking like far too much.
It is looking like far too much at this point. We're going to be so busy doing all these TV reviews and discussion, but hopefully some of them give us as much meaty conversation as Mr. Robot does. So thanks very much for watching. Get us on Twitter at mild_fuzz. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. It helps us out a lot. Thank you very much, guys, and bonsoir, Elliot. Which I know means hello. I'm not an idiot.